Hey guys, Keith Engel, TGI Sports Talk. I'm just going to do this till I get it right. Apologize. We had some serious audio issues, 10 minutes of dead air this morning. I'm going to redo the Todd Stottlemyre interview. So if you didn't see it earlier, you might get to see it live now. I apologize not being in my studio, but you get to see some of the things that go on in the background with monitors and soundboards and whatever else. So Todd Stottlemyre is my guest today. We're going to replay that interview here in a second. Todd is was a 14-year major league pitcher with the Toronto Blue Jays, won 2 world championships there, pitched with the A's, the Cardinals, Rangers, the Diamondbacks, played under a couple of iconic managers in Cito Gaston and Tony La Russa, who we're going to talk about a little bit. And also is the son of an iconic Yankee pitcher, Mel Stottlemyre, one of my favorites growing up. We'll talk to Todd a little bit about, growing up as the son of a Major League Baseball player. So, and Roy White actually was my guest last week, who I'll thank right now. Again, Todd certainly will share a quick story about Roy White as well. So again, apologize for the sound issues this morning. Here's the replay of my Todd Stottlemyre interview, and hopefully it goes a bit better than it did this morning. And if there's any issues, let me know, but we're going to try to share that interview right now. I hope everybody can hear me now. This is 2 weeks in a row I had audio issues. Something's going on with my soundboard, I guess. So I apologize there. If somebody who is in the room can comment that they can hear us now, I appreciate it. Todd Stottlemyre, I was introducing as my guest, which I think I was miming. So I thank you for coming in. I apologize for the audio issues.
Well, I'm so sorry. I hope it wasn't me on this side. I kept trying to find but.
Nah, I had an issue before you got in the room because I had started the show at 8. All is good. Okay, good. We're good. So anyway, I will start over. My guest today. Well, let me start before I start. I want to thank Roy White from last week. Nobody heard that either. Roy was on. We had a great reception to his interview. You may remember Roy from when you were a kid, Todd.
Oh, yeah, for sure. 100%.
We had he's a great guy. One of the classiest guys around. I know he played for years with your dad. And we had a great time. So my guest today, Todd Stottlemyre. Todd pitched in the major leagues for, I guess, 14-ish years, maybe 13 if we count a year you were out with an injury. But 2-time world champion with the Toronto Blue Jays. You pitched with the A's, the Cardinals, the Rangers, the Diamondbacks. I think you just missed out on another world championship there when you were injured for a year. So we're going to jump around a little here, Todd. I think as I get older, I tend to have a stream of consciousness more than, staying in a straight line. But I think it plays well for these types of interviews, and they aren't just a Q&A. I ask a question, you answer it, and we'll jump around a little bit because I think it seems to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, your career, you had a really, strong career in the major leagues, and you've pivoted in your second life, for lack of a better term. But it all kind of plays together, the things that happened to you as a younger man in the major leagues and what you're doing today.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of probably part of life, I guess. First of all, starting now, you mentioned Roy White, and for me, growing up in Yankee Stadium and having Yankee Stadium as a playground, I still remember Roy White jumping over that left field wall, that short left field wall, and robbing home runs, right? So, and then, to be around the stadium with my father, to have a dream, to follow in his footsteps, to play Major League Baseball, to live that dream out was incredible. I mean, came with trials and came with setbacks and challenges, just like everyone else in life. After the game, I was blessed and very lucky that I had a lot of people when I retired, or a lot of teams and a lot of opportunities to stay in the game. I chose a different route, and I'm grateful I did. But at the same time, I'm still a big fan and a friend of the game and love the game. But I'm really excited about 5.5 years ago. I was with my father. He was having a very difficult time and fighting multiple myeloma, and I was up with him up in Seattle, and here I'm watching this guy go through just a grueling process just to stay alive, but yet never playing victim, and had this incredible attitude and vision about his life, and never complained one bit. And I remember being up there, and I remember one night just staring at the ceiling, not being able to sleep, and I'm just like, wow. I mean, he was inspiring me like never before. And at that moment, what I realized is, from the time I grew up, and then the time I got a chance to play Major League Baseball, and I got to be around champions, I get to learn from my father, I get to learn from Tony La Russa, Cito Gaston, Ricky Henderson, Dennis Eckersley, Dave Winfield, Paul Molitor, Ozzie Smith, Jack Morris, all these Hall of Famers. I had a front row seat, and I used all of their processes for my benefit. But what I realized at that moment is, I'd never offered the help to someone else to help them get better. And that was the morning I walked down and I said, Dad, I'm going to write a book. And he was like, you should. That was 5.5 years ago. The first book was Relentless Success. And now here we are, within just a few days away from the launch of my second book, The Observer, which I'm really, really excited about, because part of The Observer is real life story that I weaved inside a fiction story with characters with nonfiction principles to help you have peak states and peak performance and become the best version of yourself. So I'm really, really excited about it.
Well, I just downloaded that actually on Kindle myself this week. Hadn't had a chance to dive into it yet, unfortunately, but the premise sounds really awesome. And the way you're able to use as you mentioned, your life story. It's not autobiographical per se, but
Right.
I'm guessing a lot of the elements are, as you mentioned. So, go back to your dad for a second. And it's funny too. I have to tell you a funny story, because I was engaged with your brother Mel a lot, during this summer a lot, and when I first decided to launch this show, as you can tell from the opening, I'm not a professional at this, but I'm trying to do the best I can and having a lot of fun doing it.
You're doing great, boss.
Thank you. Mel and I we're going back and forth, and he was going to come on the show, and I think the Marlins' success might have caught him by surprise, because we kind of lost track of each other. Then I became friends with you on Facebook, and was following a lot of your posts, which were very inspirational, very motivational, by the way. I just shared one this morning. I commented on that you posted, I think, on the 14th of this month, about choices and decision making. And it's a 1 minute little video that I want to share with my team. I manage a team of 23 people, and I look for things like this all the time.
Right.
So awesome. I thank you for going that way. And it's funny that I got you on, and Mel, I kind of want to stop bothering him, because he probably thinks I'm stalking him at this point. So
keep bothering. It's okay.
Agreed. That's the only thing I've had in my life that's helped me get where I am, is persistency and consistency. Right. So
right. That's right.
Going back to your dad real quick. I mean, he was one of my heroes growing up. I'm a little bit older than you, but he was one of those guys he came up when the Yankees were just ending a great dynasty, and he was a great pitcher and one of the great players, underrated players in baseball at that time, I think, just because of the teams he played on. And I was so happy that the Yankees finally gave him a plaque before he did pass on, and my condolences to losing your dad last year, by the way. I think it was time that the Yankees did do that. Roy White is another guy who deserves that type of recognition, I think. The Yankees retire numbers like they're it's popcorn today. It's crazy.
Right.
Great players. So what was it like? Did you get a chance? I mean, you were a young boy yet, before your dad retired, and I always thought it was a shame, by the way, that he didn't get to be part of that resurgence in the mid to later 70s. Right. Do you remember? You mentioned Roy White. Do you have really strong recollections of that time and being in the clubhouse and traveling?
Yeah, because it was our childhood. So for the first 10 years of my life, and there's you're so impressionable at that time. But Yankee Stadium truly was a playground. We literally went to the stadium every day with my father and for home games. And, my brothers and I, we'd throw on our little Yankee uniforms and it was a free for all, whether, during batting practice, roaming the field, or during the game, roaming the clubhouses. There were even times that we would go up and prior to 72, sit on the lap of Mrs. Babe Ruth and
Wow.
talk her into buying us ice cream. And there was the incredible memories, and I remember, what's fun is I remember the great stuff. And for us as the kids, everything is great in the stadium, but then the family barbecues on off days, and a lot of times back then they'd play double headers, and then the next day would be an off day, and there would always be the Yankee guys on the team, my father and Munson and Nettles and Mercer and all these guys would they'd have barbecues, and I loved being around the Mercer family and
Bobby Ray was my guy. Loved Bobby.
Man. And then going fishing in early mornings with my dad and Thurman Munson. I mean, just incredible memories. It was an incredible childhood for my brothers and I, and just forever grateful for it, because, you can't pick your parents, but boy, if I could pick mine, I would pick the ones I got, because I'm just so blessed and so grateful that my mother and father, the environment, how we grew up was incredible.
It's funny, we don't always recognize it, in the moment. But we do as we get older in life. We realize we had the parents that we should have had all along, most of us anyway.
Right, for sure.
So obviously you have some talent, and as you moved through, I think you went to junior college before you went to a major college, but you were drafted by the Yankees in '83, I want to say, in the 5th round, but you decided to go to school.
Right.
And you got drafted actually 3 times before you actually went to the major leagues.
Right.
2 times is very high draft picks. Any regrets about never going to the Yankees and following your dad's footsteps? I know you wore his number a lot of years.
Yeah. No, that was probably the tough one, was out of high school, after growing up in New York, my dad playing for the Yankees. If you said baseball to us, it meant Yankees. And then to be drafted by the New York Yankees, it was so tough, because all I wanted to do was play ball. But, we kind of kept going back and forth, and then we got to the end of the summer, and I was like, my brother, Mel Jr., as you mentioned earlier, was a year older, and he'd gone on to school. And I was like, man, if I'm good enough, I'll go hang out with my brother at school. And if I'm good enough later, then great, I'll get another opportunity. So that was kind of my mindset. And my mother really thought that, school was great for my brother. First time, think about it. It's your first time away from home. I had literally just turned 18. So I was a young senior in high school, where I was 17 the whole time. Hey, I needed time to mature and this and that. And college was a great route. I don't regret it. It would have been awesome, I think, that to be able to share the uniform with my father. He was a Yankee pitching coach for so long. I think that would have been really cool. But at the same time, I'm sure it would have been more difficult on him. Like, you think back, you're not going to do well all the time. So think back that, if I'm struggling, and my father's the pitching coach, they're probably going to put a lot of pressure and heat on my father because I'm struggling, and especially in New York. So maybe it's best it didn't work out that way, but it would have been one hell of a blast to share those pinstripes with him, even if it was for a year.
I'm guessing, even though he wasn't your official pitching coach in a lot of your career, he might have been your unofficial pitching coach anyway, right?
Without question, and I think you get a chance to talk to my brother, he'll tell you he was more than a father. He was a best friend, and he was a brother, but he was also dad when he needed to be dad. And he was our greatest coach, mentor, and working partner. So without question.
Well, as your career got started, you did finally end up getting drafted, I think, number 3 by the Blue Jays in the 1st round, right?
Correct.
Which you probably, money's all relative depending on the era and the decade that we're talking about. The money probably was significantly different then if you'd signed in the fifth round with the Yankees a couple of years before that anyway.
Right, right.
Um, as you got there, I mean, you were a different person than you became later on in your career. We'll certainly go through that. I mean, you went through some tribulations as a child, and with your younger brother and his illness, and sadly his passing, which kind of affected you emotionally for a
Mhm.
lot of years, right?
Yeah. So, it really takes us keep back to 1993. 1993, I'm a pitcher with the Toronto Blue Jays, and we just won our second world championship. So we'd won in 92 and 93, back-to-back world champions. I'm living out my childhood dream of making millions of dollars. If you looked at me from the outside, you're like, wow, man, this is a guy lived out his childhood dream, grew up in Yankee Stadium. He's now playing Major League Baseball. He's making millions of dollars. He's in his 20s, and now he's a back-to-back world champion. It's like, you think, like, geez. The problem was when I looked in the mirror, I didn't like the guy staring back at me. And I had a real problem with the guy staring back at me because 12 years prior to that point, I had my little brother was 11 and he was on his third bout of leukemia, battling the disease, the cancer leukemia. And he went in and out of remission a couple times, but the cancer was back for a third time at age 11. And I was 15 at the time, and the doctors deemed his only chance for a long life was a bone marrow transplant. So, they tested all the family. I was the perfect match. I was the one that was the closest to him. So I got the opportunity to give him a bone marrow transplant, and it seemed like it went really well. And up until about 2 days of him being released from the hospital, body went into a coma and then eventually took his life. And basically his body rejected my marrow. But, standing over him that night after he'd taken his last breath, it was just horrifying for our family, to think that my mother and father had to bury now their 11-year-old son who'd been battling cancer since 7. It was a tragic time. It was terrible. And we had, you can only imagine the sadness, because I know that there's listeners out there that have gone through this same exact sadness that I'm talking about. But I had two other emotions as I stood over him. I had hate. I hated the world. I was so upset that my little brother was just taken away from me. And then I had guilt. I was like, man, did my marrow have something to do with killing my little brother or with him dying? At 15, you don't really understand everything, but that's the emotion that I left the hospital with. And I kept that emotion until I got to a point, which was really the winter of 93 after 2 world championships. And, I was just sick and tired of kind of ending up in the same place and responding the same way, not only on the field, but off the field, reacting, having sleepless nights because, man, I felt bad about how I emotionally acted. And I reached out to the guru of baseball, a guy by the name of Harvey Dorfman. He wrote The Mental Game of Baseball. He was Major League Baseball psychology and mindset coach. And I reached out to him and I called him the winter of 93. And I said, Harvey, I said, this is Todd Stottlemyre. And he said, I've been waiting on your call. And I said, I didn't even know you knew who I was, Harvey. And anyways, I said, I need to meet. He goes, I know. We booked a meeting. It was supposed to be for a couple hours, lasted 12 hours long. And in that meeting early on, he asked me, he said, Todd, would you do it again? And I was like, Harvey, do what? He said, would you give that bone marrow transplant to your little brother all over again? And I just broke down in tears and just wiped me out. And I was like, Harvey, I'd do it every minute of every hour of every day if I could, if it would help. And he said to me, he said, Todd, didn't you already do that? And I said, yes. He says, did you do everything you could do? And I said, yes. He said, you held nothing back. I said, Harvey, I did everything I could do. He says, then let it go. He says, you're not God. You didn't kill your little brother. You've already done everything you can do. It is time for you to let it go. And at that moment, it was like this huge elephant was off my shoulders, because for more than a decade, it's the first time someone gave me permission. And it's the first time someone challenged what I took away from that hospital, that I had something to do with his death. And then later on, before we broke that day, he says, I want to put you on a challenge for 7 days. Here's the challenge. I need you to observe the way you think and feel. You are not allowed to respond or react, only to document your thoughts and your emotions over the next 7 days anytime you're challenged or you emotionally get into an uproar. I said, deal. He said, now remember, you are not allowed to react or respond, only observe and only document. And it was the making of the book of the Observer that we're just getting ready to release. But after the 7 days, he said, we'll go through it. We'll build you a tool chest to help you keep in peak performance so you can always pursue the best version of you on the field and off the field. And that's the place where I was at. So
You actually had some of your better years. I mean, you might have left the Blue Jays, but you had some of your better career years, I think, after that point in time.
right. Yeah, you know what's crazy? If you look at me, not a team standpoint, but personally,
Yeah.
you look at my stats and the pitcher and the emotional pitcher I was from 88 to 93. And then you go take a look at the stats and the emotional pitcher that I was from 94 throughout. I'm two completely different pitchers.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm two different pitchers is because I'm literally two different people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're it's funny. I mean, one thing that pops up, and I mean, so let me ask you before I jump into that quick story. I mean, do you have any regrets from the old Todd? Is there anything, I mean, anything bad that really happened that you regret?
No, I think I'm like everyone else. You know, you'd say, well, would you change the story and the storyline? I mean, of course I would change it knowing what I know today. But the reason I have no regrets is because every incident or every situation led me to somewhere else that helped me become who I am today.
Yeah.
So to have regrets, it would be to say that I don't like where I'm at or I don't like what I've overcome. And it's what makes me so proud of the book is because, you know, I'm like, I was normal. I was in pain. I was living in darkness even though I look great from the outside, on the inside, I was living in darkness. And it's an opportunity for me to share that darkness, but with the world through the book, but also to tell people that if you're in that place and you're in a place of hate or you're in a place of unforgiveness or you're in a place of guilt, hey, look, you can come out the other side. It's possible. You have to have the right tools, the right understanding, and you have to be willing and want to change. Yeah. And I was willing and I wanted to change.
And some of those instances, well, a lot of those instances, or all of them, if we deal with them the right way, as you have talked about, make us the people that we are today. I'm a far better person at 60 years old today than I was even at 50 or 40, 30, you know, and I wouldn't change anything either. And I've been through, you know, the experiences that you have. But one of the instances I want to chat about, I mean, obviously a great career. It did change, you know, as you said, pre-Blue Jays or during the Blue Jay times and after, but you're still very successful with the Blue Jays, two-time world champions. One of the things that, and I don't know whether you're happy about being famous for this or not, but you had a little feud with the mayor and I think future governor of Pennsylvania at the time, Rendell, right?
Rendell.
I mean, how did that come about? And tell me a little bit about the story. And have you guys ever made up?
So, you know, it was right before. So in the World Series, it's the only time that the media interviews and has a discussion with the starting pitcher. And it happens the day before your start instead of after you start, right? So I go in for my pregame interview. It's the 93 World Series. Our PR director, Howard Starkman, walks me up to the podium and you know, there's national media everywhere. And I sit down, sit in front of the mic, and then the questions, here they come. And everyone was like, hey, Mayor Rendell was like, did you hear what he said? And I was like, no. And he said that the Blue Jays must be throwing the World Series by starting you because he said he could hit you. I was like, oh, really? I said, well, go get him. You know, so the feud started. So I like locked onto it right away because you see, this is prior to Harvey Dorfman. I was just challenged by these questions, things I couldn't control. Here would come the hate and this guilt and this unforgiveness, and I would turn into this competitive animal, this emotion. And I was like, let's go get him right now and tell him to bring his bat, make sure he wears a helmet. And this feud started, and it's all prior to me pitching in a World Series game. So instead of thinking about how I'm going to get the hitters out in my game and focusing on that, it's all this thing about the mayor said this, the mayor said that, and then it just kept going and going, and it had steam. And then eventually Howard Starkman, our PR director, got me up and got me out of there. Well, the problem is he knew it. Mayor Rendell knew what he was doing, because I was an emotional guy, and I attached right to it. And then, of course, you wrestle with it all night. By the time I got to the mound the next night, I was emotionally worn out, because I was on the inside. I was fighting Mayor Rendell, something that had nothing to even do with the game. And this is what really led me to, after the World Series, is like, I was sick of being there and getting caught up emotionally. And, after the World Series, I had some, in the parade, I had some choice words to say, and I wasn't a smart enough guy to realize that it was being filmed live at the time of the parade and my remarks, and it just basically broadcast around the world like instantly. But a few days later, I did reach out to his office, and I'll remember, so whoever answered the phone, I said, is Mayor Rendell, can I speak to Mayor Rendell? And they said, who's calling? I said, this is Todd Stottlemyre. And they said, hold on 1 second. And then the lady came back and she said, he's not in the office today. Can I take a message? I said, yeah, just tell him I called. And, really, I wanted to call him and say, hey, basically, my bad. That's the wrong response, and I'm not proud of it. But the real reason I called him is I said, hey, we should put together a charity event, and I should pitch to you. You should try to hit off of me. We should raise money and then give the money away to good cause. Let's take a bad moment and give it away to something good. But that never happened. And it is what it is. But it eventually led me to having a conversation with Harvey Dorfman, which was, for me, was life-changing and everything I needed at the moment.
So it's funny that you were part of your transformation to Ed Rendell. That's an interesting point of debarkation, right? So
yeah, well, I mean, if you think about your life, you think about so many times in life where you're going through something, you think it's the worst thing in the world, and it's like, how can this happen to me, and this and that, and then you get further away from it in life, and you look back and you say, that was the blessing. To me, that was the tipping point, the '93 World Series, because I felt like, man, I'm a better pitcher than this, and I'm a better person than this, and I was like, here I go again. Yeah. And I was like, man, I'm just, and for me, it was the tipping point to saying and being vulnerable and courageous enough to say, hey, I need help.
Well, through your career, and for those who just joined us, and I apologize again in the beginning if you were here and you couldn't hear me, but welcome. My guest today is Todd Stottlemyre, former Major League Baseball pitcher, two-time World Series champion, and author of a couple of really good books. The little bit that I've skimmed through them, as I said, very good. Relentless Success, and a new one coming out here just a few days, The Observer. Will certainly push those books further. I'll just say hi to my dad. My dad is my number one fan, Todd. We were talking about dads before.
There you
go. My dad never misses a show, never misses a vlog that I do. Everything. He jumps in. He's not even a huge sports fan, but he's a supporter. So that's awesome. Going back to the dad thing. So through your career, I mean, you played for two, and I'm going to guess two very different men, two of the best managers in my mind in baseball, one who hasn't gotten his credit and one who's gotten all kinds of credit, and Cito Gaston, you mentioned earlier, and Tony La Russa. And I want to start with Cito. I mean, Cito, he never got another job after the Blue Jays, which always amazed me. I'm not sure, and I don't think it's because he didn't want one. And I don't think he gets the credit that he should for those Blue Jays World Championships. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I got a chance to see Cito at a reunion that we had just a few years ago, and sat down with him. And if you could listen to all the Blue Jay guys that played for him, and if you interviewed each and every one of them, every single one of them would pay some sort of tribute to Cito Gaston, which is incredible because, that was a talented group. But not only did Cito affect them or have an effect on them personally and have an effect on our team while we were there, Cito Gaston also had the knack for affecting people for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Some of the messages and some of the moments that a lot of those guys carried that with them. I remember Pat Borders, and I was sitting with Pat and Cito, and Pat Borders said, Cito, because of the way you were, it's kind of the way, and Pat was coaching and working in the minor leagues. He goes, I try to be who you were to me. I try to be that to the other guys. You made that kind of an impact and influence on me. So, to be able for Cito to manage that talent, win back-to-back world championships. Just think about how many teams in the history of baseball have won back-to-back world championships. Well, not that many. So it takes more, obviously, and we had great talent. But here was another thing: is the manager, it's up for you to manage that talent and the emotions of that talent and the ego of that talent. And Cito, for me, he was my Canadian father. I can't say enough for him. I said to him just a couple of years ago, I go, what a joke that you're not in the Hall of Fame. And I truly feel that way about him and what he did for the organization, for the Toronto Blue Jays, for the city, for the country. Maybe, I don't know this, but maybe I remember when we played in the World Series in 1992, no one in baseball wanted Toronto to play in a World Series because of TV and this and that. So maybe it had something to do with it that we were the Canadian team and all the other baseball teams at that time outside of the Expos, of course, were in the United States. So I don't know. And then to win back-to-back, it's like we're playing the American pastime and the Canadian team just won back-to-back World Series.
Yeah.
You step back from that and you're like, so who knows?
And Cito certainly wasn't one to draw attention to himself. I mean, he was quiet leader, right? Remind me a little of Joe Torre's style a little bit, I think, in a way.
Very much, yeah.
But do you think that the factors you just talked about led to him not? I mean, his name would come up for jobs after that, but he never got another chance, which I thought was a shame. You think it's because of the same factors you just mentioned?
I don't know, but those things possibly had something to do with it, but man, what a great man, and I'm lucky to have him as a manager, and he had some great lessons. Matter of fact, one of the principles and models in the book comes from Cito Gaston, and it shows up in the Observer, and I'm proud of that.
That's good. I was going to ask you. You move on from the Blue Jays to the A's. I think were your next stop, and they were kind of on the back end of their dynasty, and right. They weren't a very good ball club, but they still had Tony La Russa. I think he only spent a year there. Tell me about Tony, and I mean, obviously a different. Totally different personality than Cito.
Yeah, I had Tony in Oakland, and then Tony went after that year in Oakland in '95. He went to take a manager job in St. Louis, and then he brought me along with him. They'd made a trade, and so I got to spend a little over 3 years with Tony La Russa. And
that was his doing, getting you from the A's to the Cards. Yeah, good.
Yeah. So Tony's one of those guys. He's probably the most prepared guy that I ever witnessed as far as a manager. There'd be times that, he'd have 3 or 4 different lineups out on his desk early in the day and just waiting to maybe check on a guy that was going to come in and make sure that he was going to be okay to put in the lineup. And if he wasn't okay to put in the lineup, it was going to be this. And if he was over, so he was one of those guys, man. It was like baseball was kind of like a game of chess and moving guys around and trying to put everyone in the right spot. And I think the best way I can say it is I came in after the All-Star game. I think it was either 90, no, it was 97. We come back from the All-Star game. I'm pitching the first game back in St. Louis, and I walk into the locker room and I'll go look at the lineup and just kind of see who's positioned where or whatever. It was just a routine. And I'm like, wow, and then all of a sudden I see, I'm hitting 8. So I walk into Tony's office. I said, Tony, the lineup card, and I'm like, is that a joke? Wrong thing to say. And he goes, what do you mean? Is that a joke? I go, well, I'm hitting 8. He goes, that's exactly right. He goes, and I'm the manager of the ball club. and he goes, and if you want to manage, then, you know, that, or what he said something about, you know, kind of like sarcasm, like he was the manager, and basically told me to get out of his office, and in a polite way. But before I left, I said, well, I was just curious, why 8? So he walked me through why. And by the way, he had a genius idea on why. So anyways, he had moved McGuire from hitting 4th to hitting 3rd up in the order. And that could potentially give McGuire one more at bat. But by hitting the pitcher 8th, then the guy hitting 9th is kind of like the second leadoff guy. So it was pretty incredible how he came up with it. But, you know, I was my typical self. And before I left, I said, well, Tony, I said, if you were going to move me up in the lineup, I just thought I should hit 3rd in this lineup. And he was like, get out of here. But Tony was like, he would look at everything in the game at a deeper level than anyone I'd ever been around. I watched him move a right fielder a half a step, not a full step.
Yeah.
I watched him move a right fielder a half a step. And I'm like, and I was sitting in the dugout. I wasn't the pitcher at the time. I was sitting in the dugout, and I was like, how did that make a difference? You know, but that's the way Tony La Russa was, and probably one of the smartest baseball guys I've ever met in my entire life.
Yeah, and I'm guessing he had a tremendous effect on your life as well. He wrote the foreword to one of your books, correct?
Yeah, he wrote the foreword to Relentless Success. Yeah, for sure.
So you're the second guy I've had on that Tony's written the foreword for his book. Greg Pryor. I don't know if you know Greg, but
yeah.
Quite a character Greg is, and I loved having him on the show. But Tony and him had didn't get along great when Greg played for him, but Tony did write the foreword for his book, which is certainly different book than the ones you're writing. But
right.
I thought it was interesting because you guys couldn't be more different in at least your approach to your post-career books. Before I move on from Tony, how's Tony going to do today?
Oh, he'll do great. You know, he'll do great. I mean, he's got just an incredible baseball mind. But, you know, if you notice and you look back over Tony's career, Tony always went out and got great coaches. Yeah. And you know, it was more than Tony. You know, I think about, you know, his pitching coach in Oakland and St. Louis, and the guy that I have by the name of Dave Duncan. Yeah, was a master. You know, I think about, you know, he brought in Lansford after his playing days. He had Dave McKay, who was his first base coach forever, and Dave is a genius. And it's like Dave was an incredible base running guy, outfield coach, and an incredible first base coach. And if there was such a thing as a Hall of Fame first base coach, that's Dave McKay, by the way. I mean, and so Tony has a knack for always surrounding himself with great coaches. Yeah. And also Tony was a big enough person to let the coaches do their job. And I think that that's what made him, Tony, and all of his staffs and the players work so well together. Tony will surround himself once again, even later on. And even though the game is changing and is more about analytics and this and that, Tony will have his thumbprint on those games. He'll be as prepared as anyone that steps into that dugout as the manager, but he'll also have an incredible staff. He'll use his staff with his players.
I find it interesting that people think the game will pass Tony La Russa by. Tony La Russa really was the father or the grandfather of this movement towards analytics in my mind.
Well,
right?
You know, I always say analytics have always been a part of the game. You know, it's always been scouting reports. You know, the analytics came through reports of guys sitting in stands and this guy runs and he runs really on first pitch, or this guy's a first ball fastball hitter, or this guy late in the game. And you take all the analysis from scouts, right? Taking one on paper, and then you try to assemble it and you try to help it give you an edge for your game. So analytics have actually always been a part of the game. The difference between being a part of the game today, it's like they're not just a spoke in the wheel. Analytics has become the wheel in the game of baseball. And to me, that's the change.
Yeah. So you move on from St. Louis to Arizona, and where you finished your career, and you had a chance to win another world championship, but you were hurt, I believe, that entire season, weren't you?
Yeah, unfortunately I had shoulder, elbow, nerve damage, and 2001 was the year I was out, and of course that's the year we win the World Series. But for me it was also great. I think if I wouldn't have played in the 92, 93 World Series and wouldn't have had championship rings and then go through that, 2001 would have been very difficult to sit through. But I had my uniform on every day, and it was kind of like I was an extra coach, and I just did whatever I could from a bench standpoint and a clubhouse standpoint to help guys in any way I could. So I'm not saying that I was any help, but it was incredible to watch everyone go through it, where I knew I was never going to play that year, and to watch them go through and to watch them perform. I had a front row seat to watching a great story unfold.
Well, it was a little painful as a Yankee fan to the ultimate outcome, because I'm laying, the games obviously go so late, and I can remember that Sunday night having a 1-run lead, and Mo Rivera comes in and say, "Awesome, it's over."
Yeah,
but it was just meant. It was a great series all the way around. So it was a lot of fun, and it was at a very important time for our country as well, obviously after 9/11. So that whole story, even though the Yankees didn't ultimately win, I think was very important for the country as a whole. Because I always feel that way. I guess given where you're at in your life now, and the books you write, I mean, even through the whole COVID situation, I have always felt sports is a very important part of the fabric of this country, where we're talking about baseball or football or college sports, because it's a distraction from everyday life, even with a lot of the things that have seeped into sports.
mm-hmm.
I think it's still important that we can play it, if we can play it safely at this time. I mean, do you feel that way yourself, that it's important?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, think about, our country's been through world wars, and our country's been through wars and all kinds of offsets, and even so, baseball would still play games. And the thing about baseball, basketball, football, all sports, golf, all of it, tennis, I don't want to leave any of it out.
Yeah,
it's a place for people to step away from their everyday pain and suffering, right? Or they're just their everyday routine, and go to a place and cheer for a team that they love. And maybe that team is a part of their city, or to cheer for, certain individuals or their favorite players. And it's also a place for the youth of the country to go, maybe with their parents, and it's a place to go dream.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a place to go dream. I mean, literally every day going to Yankee Stadium and being around it, it was like, man, it's a place to dream. And it's like, and that is so important and so invigorating, that, to have a place, and for the fans, sometimes it's a release, right? It's like, I get to go cheer for my team, yell against the other one, and all of that. And it just makes sports what it really is. But to me, it's so important to the nation. And, for me, it was, you watch these and you see the cardboard cutouts, and I'm like, wow, it's just not the same. And I know they try to play, they hit the fan music or noise over the deal, but I can't even imagine. And I tip my hat to all these athletes that are playing in empty stadiums, because they're not used to playing in empty stadiums. And when you take the emotional piece of the fan away from the game, you're taking a big piece of the game away. So I'm praying and hoping that in 2021 that we start to see stadiums fill up again. And because the fans are a big part of the game.
Yeah, it may not be at the start of the season, but I hope that we get, through the summer that we can
Yeah.
start getting back to that. A lot of the players feed off that energy of the crowds too, right? So, and you would know that better than I.
Yeah, like I say, I can't even imagine playing in front of an empty stadium. Once you play in front of full stadiums and then go play in an empty stadium, that's why I say I tip my hat to those guys, because now, it's like a lot of times hometown fans and the cheering, or maybe you walk into a place, you're the underdog and everyone's yelling at you. It's fuel, and it's fuel for you to play at your peak, and it's an emotional strength. And that's missing from the game, which means it's up to each and every one of those players to emotionally get to a peak state on their own. It's not that easy.
Yeah, it's kind of like the way the rest of us have to go about our job now, right?
That's it.
Motivate yourself and not
Right. Yeah.
feed off of others. Well, we can feed off of others a bit. It's interesting as you pivot, and I know that you were, and maybe you still are a bit. You moved into the financial world after you retired, um, and then moved into these. I don't know. They end up in a self-help section, like on Amazon. I don't know if that's exactly the right word. I would call them more motivational or inspirational books
Right.
myself.
Right.
But you're a good person to write those types of books in my mind. And this isn't to kiss up to you in any way, I promise you. But you, through your career, you had seen personal success and a lot of team success, which is important to a guy like me who manages people. Um, because you won two World Series, but you also were on the precipice of three others. I believe you lost three. We were on teams that lost three league championship series, so you were that close to three more World Series.
Yeah.
Um, and all of that, I assume, again, as we talked about earlier, we'll take this full circle now to today and the new book and also the relentless success rather. What else would you want to add about those? Because I want to make sure that we push those, and I'm going to do that afterwards. I was going to play a clip that the one that I liked so much the other day, but I'll post it to the site afterwards so we don't take time.
Well, I would say, Keith, I appreciate, first of all, you having me on and giving me a platform and an opportunity to, talk and share about the books, and because without you doing what you do, I wouldn't be able to do this and promote. So I want to tip my hat to you, first of all, and to say I really appreciate you having me on the show. And
I'm not Joe Rogan, but I'll get you in front of as many thousands of people as I can. I can't promise millions, unfortunately.
There you go. There you go. Well, everyone counts. I think that what's really important, and I didn't plan it this way. It's just the way it works out. And, because we had a plan late last year that I was going to do this book, or, in 2019, I was going to write this book in 2020. And I was working with the publisher on writing plans and kind of building how are we going to do it this go around and that sort of thing. And then for COVID to hit and stay at home orders, and you have this pandemic and you have all of this, and now the book is getting ready to come out, and I had a lot of extra time to do some writing because of COVID, and it gave me some extra time. But if you take a look at 2020, and you take a look that we've had political wars, we've had race wars, we've had a spiritual war, we've had COVID wars. And throughout all of these wars, you've seen a nation have so much hate like never before. And, it's kind of like I always say, did we forget the golden rule? Treat others how you want to be treated, and love thy neighbor. And I'm like, what happened to those rules and those things and great standards to live by? And here I am writing this book, and you see so much hatred out there today. And here I write a book that came from hate. It came from anger, and it came from a place that I had to overcome. So, here we are at the end, and as the book gets released. So for me, it's like, it might be my most important work I've ever accomplished, just because of the state of where we are as a country and as a world. And in this book, and what I would tell you is the book is so much about creating clarity and an awareness really around how you think and how you feel. And the beauty of that is we're human beings, and based on our choices, we can't change overnight, but we can change our direction overnight, and we can change our direction instantly. And there are tools, and let's face it, there's about 26,000 thoughts that we go through every day, and most of those are negative. The question is, what are you doing with a negative thought? And if you focus on it and then you give it more attention, the more attention and the more focus you give to something negative, the more negative you get in your life. See, that's the life I lived. I lived in so much hate and so much pain and so much regret as with my little brother and so much guilt that I just kept getting more of it. It kept showing up in my life. And the beauty of the observer in this work and why I'm so excited about it is because that was my mess. That's the pain I lived in. And it's my message today because of the help of other people like my father, like Cito Gaston, like Tony La Russa, like Harvey Dorfman. Because of great men in my life, they helped me overcome my mess. And today it's become my message. But it's not just, the book is not just about overcoming. It's about understanding peak performance and how to stay in that state of mind and that state of emotion, because it's so important. So I'm really excited about it. I think it can help a lot of people. I hope people will read it. And I there's over 50 different models and principles of peak performance that are spread out through these characters in this book. And each one of those represented life change for me. So that means my life has changed more than 50 times. So my hope and prayer is someone will read the book, and because of one of them, they'll say, wow. And they'll try it and they'll use it and they'll apply it. And because of it, it'll help them change their life. That's my prayer. And that's my prayer for people who pick up the book.
Well, I think if people will pick up the book, it will have a tremendous effect on them. I haven't read it, as I said, but I've watched enough of your messages on your Facebook page, and I've looked at some of the interviews you've done, and you and people like you can help us get out of this negative malaise that we're in. And it's funny that you mention it. It's so much easier. I see it every day at work. As I said, managing a group of 23 people, it's so much easier to be negative than it is to be positive. And it's just, you have to work at it.
Yeah, that's right.
Here, and I use your messages every day. That's why I haven't commented a lot, but I love the one the other day. And I'm going to get into this book, I promise you, this weekend, and I'll do what I can to push it for you for sure.
That'll be awesome.
So I appreciate I appreciate your career. I enjoyed watching it as your dad, along with your dad's career, as I said. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got to offer us in this next chapter of your life. So congratulations on that. And I wish you success in the book. I'm going to let you go now. If you want to chat for a couple minutes when after I wrap up the show, it'll be pretty quick. Fine, if you got to run, I understand. But I'd love to chat with you just real quick when I get done, if you're amenable to that.
Yeah, that'd be great. And once again, sir, thanks for having me, and thanks for helping me spread the message. So I really appreciate you.
Absolutely, no problem. Anytime, and I'll do what I can. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you.
So my guest today, Todd Stottlemyre, former Major League pitcher, author of a new book. We want to focus on The Observer. Please look for the book on Amazon or wherever you might buy your books, whether it's hardcover or if you've moved into the world of Kindle. It's going to be a great read. I've started to follow a lot of Todd's messages that he posts on his Facebook page, and follow that too, because he does post a lot of great messages, guys, and we can really use it today. We don't get into a lot of the social and political issues that we're going through, but this is a way that we can approach it from a positive standpoint, and that's the way it has to be to ever end. So again, I thank Todd. I don't have my closing music today. I apologize. So we're still a little dreary here in East Greenbush, New York. Throughout the Northeast, keep bigging out of that snow. I've still got some work to do myself today. I think Todd today. I'll be on Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern time. We'll wrap up the college football championships and look ahead at the NFL schedule. No show on Christmas Day necessarily. I'll probably be on quickly with Mac and Jack that morning, assuming my wife lets me slip away for 20 minutes. And we'll be back on January 1st. I'll have an interview with Lloyd Walton, former All-American guard with the Marquette Warriors, and a very important cog in the Players Association, the NBA Players Association now, as far as career development and such, and guys working after their career. a little bit like we talked about with Todd today. So I thank you all. Sorry for the no music. Sorry for the problem in the beginning of the show. I'll probably try to edit a little bit before we share it. But I'll see you guys and have a great weekend. We'll chat with you soon. Keith Engel for TGI Sports Talk. See you soon. Bye.